allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning, everyone. Our next meeting is going to be on Friday, January 9th, 9 o'clock as always. And again, please turn off your cell phones. Okay, before we get into our program today, we have a presentation to make, and I'd like Jerry Densdorf and Mike Hurley to come forward, please. This is in recognition for Jerry Densdorf's work on the Watch Order program. And by count, I guess, of the security folks, Jerry to date has performed over 2,500 watches for our different houses here. In case you're not familiar with that, we have a program that when our people are away, particularly our snowbirds, but anybody in the community that will be away for any amount of time can come and register with the district, and security, and primarily our specialist, Jerry, will check each house periodically. And it's not just a matter of Jerry's checking, but in doing so, he's uncovered, learned, seen a lot of problems. He's corrected these problems, and he received an awful lot of thanks from the people of this community. So, Jerry, all I can say is well done. And Mike, if you'll come up and present this.
Jerry didn't know he was getting this today. He thought he was supposed to bring reports to report back to you guys. So Jerry never asked for any pat on the back. He does a great job. I've had over 100 people work for me over my years, and he's probably the most passionate employee I ever had. He does a great job for the district. He's so caring, and we are very fortunate to have him work for us. So I want to thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, the only thing I have to say, this is not my idea. And as far as the watch order, it all came from Mike and Joe. Joe works with me all the time with this. And but I do think for our community it is really, really great, because for most of us that play golf and we're around all the time, we're able to see what goes on, see where our assessments go and our money goes. And for many of the people that you go to their homes and you see them, the one question, well, why do you do this? And my answer is, because you live at Sun and Lake. And they say, well, what happened? How's that happen? I say, well, it starts with a board of supervisors, and it just goes down the chain, and then it goes to security, which is part of the political part here, and then Mike and Joe, they have set this up, and I think the people really appreciate it, and I don't need this. The security does, and you all need this more than I do. But thank you very much.
Okay, let's move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve. I'll second that.
Discussion by the board? Public discussion? Bring it back to the board. Allison?
Supervisor Hurlburt.
Yes.
Supervisor McCullough.
Yes.
Supervisor Halbig.
Yes.
Supervisor White.
Yes.
President Miller.
Yes. Okay, we move on to the action agenda. First up is Resolution 1219-39, and that's the board approving for the regular meetings of our board for this coming year. I need a motion for approval on that.
Motion to approve.
Second. Okay, any discussion by the board? Any public discussion? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. And Allison?
Supervisor McCullough.
Yes.
Supervisor Halbig.
Yes.
Supervisor White.
Yes.
Supervisor Hurlburt.
Yes.
President Miller.
Yes. Next up is Resolution 1219-40, and that's the approval of the contract with McClure and LaBozo to provide legal services to Sun and Lake for this calendar year 2015. I need a motion for that, please.
I so move. Second.
Okay, board discussion?
John, the fee schedule's the same as it has been, right?
For the last many years, yes.
Okay.
No increase.
Okay.
Yeah, John, I have a question. That's on the issue of conflict. That's item number 12 in the contract. Would you clarify that for me, please? When you talk about conflicts of interest between the board and perhaps the general manager, I think you said last year that you are a servant of the board. Is that correct?
Yes.
You report to the board. Walk us through that particular phase or that language.
I'll give you an example by analogy, if I may. In representing the school board, I represent the board itself. The superintendent of schools, which is akin to the general manager here, has different things, and occasionally conflicts arise, particularly in the event of, let's say there's a teacher termination. The board sits in judgment of the teacher, and the superintendent is in essence the prosecutor, and then the teacher has a defense counsel. So I obviously can't represent the superintendent and the board at the same time. In this case, excuse me, if there ever were to be a case where something had to be brought before the board to decide, and the general manager were to be presenting an advocacy position against another party, then I would be representing the board and advising the board. I could not represent the general manager, both as advocate and the board as the determining body.
So there's no lack of clarification in your mind about where your particular duty lies in this regard. Is that correct?
None at all. I mean, for example, if the board, as a board, were to take a position adverse to the general manager, clearly I have to advise the board. I cannot advise a general manager in such a circumstance.
Okay. Just checking on that. Allison, there's a date, I think it's September 11th, it's mentioned in the contract for end of evaluation for the coming year. Would you be sure and red tag that
Absolutely.
in your file so that we have adequate notice? Any other comments from the board?
Now that you brought this up, I had a question as I ran through this earlier. Item number 1, John, where you say provide general overall legal services and consultation to district and its board, officers, agents, and employees. The employees just jumped out at me. Why? How? Explain that, please.
As an example, it depends on how you determine what an officer and an employee is. Typically, an officer is also an employee. Every employee of the board does not have access to me for legal services on behalf of the district, typically. But I would advise somebody like Bob Brumfield, an employee of the board, for code enforcement matters. I would advise Tanya. with respect to issues that come up with regard to her billing issues and things of that nature. That's what that means. It doesn't mean, in other words, if a low-level employee at the sewer plant, let's say, has a DUI, he can come to me and talk to me about it for the district. No.
Okay, did I ask for public comment?
No.
Is there public comment? Any final comments by the board? Allison?
Supervisor Halbig?
Yes?
Supervisor White?
Yes.
Supervisor Holbert?
Yes.
Supervisor McCullough?
Yes.
President Miller?
Yes.
Thank you.
Last item on the, you may or may not thank us later on. Last item on the action agenda is Resolution 1219-41, and that is the sign and landscape contract resolution. Tanya, shall I speak to that, or would you like to speak to that?
I'd like for you to speak on that, please.
Okay. I was involved in the...
Need a motion to approve?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Need a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. I was involved in the negotiations with Mike Wright and the Bell people. We had some minor issues as far as clarification and understanding, but I think as everything is in place right now, what strikes me is they seem to be extremely cooperative in what we're hoping to do. It's a tight schedule, but they feel confident they could meet it. We'll get started right after the first of the year, so I am satisfied that we have a proper contract in place. John, speaking of that, we don't have your seal on this.
I'll handwrite it at the end of the meeting, sir.
Okay, so we're approving this. We're approving this with that understanding. Is that correct?
Our office drafted the contract. Yes.
All right. Any other board comments?
I've got some questions on the resolution itself. On the I guess the fourth paragraph where it says Tangram Designs and Don Bill signs. The general manager determined that presentation should be made. I think the board of supervisors determined that, not the general manager.
We'll make that modification, sir. My apologies for that. I'm not trying to pass the buck. It comes to me, I know, but I was out of the office when that was drafted and sent to the district.
Okay, I understand that. Down a little further where it says the board of supervisors directed, it says general manager, and I believe it was President Miller that was directed to negotiate with Don Bell. And the same thing applies to the next paragraph, whereas the general manager and Don Bell signs. I think that was also Supervisor Miller. As far as the resolution is concerned, and that's all the questions I got. And I don't know if I'm correct in saying that, or do you agree with that, John?
At this point, sir, without reviewing the minutes, I couldn't say. I know that Mr. Miller was actively involved in the negotiations, but I can't remember if the board actually directed Mr. Miller to do that.
I think so. I think there was a consensus that Mr. Miller would be Supervisor Miller would be the point person on the contract negotiations.
Why don't we just delete that one sentence, sir?
Do what?
Let's delete that sentence. All right.
2 sentences.
Okay. Both of them?
Those sentences, in my opinion, add nothing to the resolution. What we're saying is that they came, they presented, we selected. So my recommendation is delete that sentence and the sentence below that.
Okay.
So we're modifying, just so the board knows what they're voting on. And do you have a motion already on the floor?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Why don't you withdraw that in the second, please? And
Okay, I withdraw the original motion.
I think I second it.
okay, so what the motion, in other words, would be to modify the resolution to replace the words general manager with board of supervisors in the fourth whereas clause, and to delete the last two whereas clauses.
Okay, I'll modify I make a motion to approve Resolution 2014-12-19-41 as amended by changing the general manager in the fourth paragraph named the Board of Supervisors and omitting the last two sentences or paragraphs where it speaks of the general manager negotiating, and the next one where it's talks about the general manager negotiating with Don Bell. Those are out.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other board comments?
On the resolution or the agreement?
Either one.
Okay, I've got some comments on the agreement.
Okay.
On the second, matter of fact, I think it's a very good document. There's a lot of work put in there. It's pretty doggone thorough. I have to say that. But there's on page number 2, item 3.2, where it says, and are wayfaring elements that could be constructed and installed as part of a separate capital project. I think we're talking about only one project here. I don't want to get involved in something where it might be more than one project.
No, we are and we aren't. Remember, we have 2 phases, and this contract directs us and covers the first phase. And you could consider it all one project, that we're going to do the conceptualizing design, and then we're going to select the contractor to do the actual signage. But let me look at that again. The wording is perhaps not as tight, but that's essentially what it means. It means that we are contracting in this particular document for the design and the concepts and the construction drawings. There will be another phase, or if you want to call it another project, it could be another project, to actually build and install the signs. So that's what we're talking about.
If I may, President Miller, I think what happened here is this was lifted pretty much out of the RFP.
Yes, it was.
Okay?
Yes, it was.
And that language was in the RFP to give the board a little wiggle room. My recommendation, now that we are at the point where we know what the project is, it's not going to be expanded, and it's really not of a separate capital project. I think the design phase and the construction phase, the semantics, I realize, but they're not really separate capital projects. It's the same project. It's 2 phases of the same project. And so
we should amend that to reflect that, because we are definitely dealing with just the phase 1 scope of work at this stage.
Well, I think if we just said what we said is 3 schematic design concepts: entrance signs, deer run golf course, turtle run golf course, parking and or other wayfinding elements that could be constructed and installed. I think if we said period there and delete the as part of a separate capital project, we pretty much have covered the basis.
Yeah, that'll work. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Okay. What else do you have, David?
Throughout this whole document, it mentions, I think, one time a budget, and that's in G, page 3, where it said bring it into budget. We don't necessarily have a budget, and I hate to sign up for a 34,000.
What one are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about where it only mentions a budget, I think, a couple places in this whole document. One is in G on page 3, to bring it into budget. And this whole document has got a lot of stuff in it, but it doesn't talk about any budget amount
for the second phase now.
For the second phase, and I don't, we're going to put up $35,000 for the first phase, and if everything comes in and blows our budget, whatever it might be, out of the water, then we've got $34,000 that hanging out there that is.
The board could also
we need to be working towards a number through this whole
right. Well, part of the deal is
program.
It's difficult to determine a budget until you have the design, And my understanding was the board was going to establish a budget after you kind of had some design ideas, and then you set the budget, and then you bid it out.
That's right.
So
Okay.
That's the intent.
I agree. The only other issue I have, I think the timeline schedule is too aggressive, because I think if you go through this and try to go through what we normally go through, I think it's going to be April before we ever get a RFP approved, and you got a deadline of June the 1st.
RFP.
We're going to design this project, and then they're going to put together a RFP, construction RFP goes to and that's part of this money here we're spending.
Yeah, but the final date for this phase is June 1st.
Oh, just phase one, not phase 1 and 2.
No, just phase 1. That's all we're dealing with in this contract is deliverables are going to be the concepts, the approved designs, and the construction documents. That's all we're talking about.
You're talking about this project, and this project's only for the design portion of it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
See, I was under the same impression as Mr. Miller here, that the whole thing would be done by June 1st, but you're only talking about phase 1 to be done by June.
That's right. All we're getting is because we still have to then bid that second phase and select a contractor for that, and then we'll set a new a budget for that, we'll set a schedule for that, and we'll go from there. So
yeah, but this thing calls for insurance requirements, for personal injury coverage, for...
That's boilerplate language.
we typically put that in every contract, and the reason for that is, what do you do if Don Bell Signs is on site and driving their vehicle and runs into a golf cart and kills 2 people? You know, those types of things can happen anytime.
I've got a complete then I was completely confused as to what this document was until just a minute ago.
And if I may respectfully point out to the board, the way it's drafted, it's quite possible that you would select the final design scheme on February 13th. It says that if you don't like February 13th, then they bring back 2 more designs for the next meeting. But if you do like February 13th and you select it, then they are given, I think it's 10 days or something like that to come up.
10 days to respond to that.
With the final drawings, and then once you have the drawings, you can go out to bid. So you don't have to wait until June 1st before you proceed with the construction drawings. But they're given until June 1st to get everything done and in place before liquidated damages comes into play.
That's right. And I should point out to the audience that there's plenty of provision for public presentation, and that will happen before the general community, not the board. The board will be here, of course, and the board will take any comments by the public under consideration for that. So we'll have plenty of time to respond. If one of the 3 concepts or any of the 3 concepts are unacceptable, then we'll go back to the drawing board, and that's written into this particular contract. So anything else?
Now, we do have a motion to approve in a second, and we did make a change.
We need an amendment?
Yes, we would need to withdraw and repropose, sir. The amendment is to delete the words from paragraph 3.2 on page 2 that states as part of the separate capital project. That's the only change.
Okay, do I have a motion for that?
Motion to approve it.
Second.
Okay. Any board discussion? Further discussion? Any public discussion on this?
I'm sorry. Allison points out that the original motion second was never actually withdrawn. If we could, who made that first motion?
It was Supervisor Halbert.
And who seconded?
Supervisor White.
Yeah, I withdrew. Yeah, they did withdraw.
Okay, they did withdraw. I thought
This
they
is the
withdrew.
second withdrawal, though.
I know. This is the second time.
You can't come up there with that jacket on.
Okay, just for clarification for the record, Supervisor White said he withdrew a second. Supervisor Halbig, did you withdraw the motion?
You have to withdraw the second motion.
I withdraw.
Okay, now, and so we've had the new motion made by Supervisor McCullough, did we get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
You sure it's okay for somebody wearing a Michigan jacket to
Not really.
address the
Not really, but
chairman of the board?
But it's the Christmas season, so,
There's not many people that will wear a jacket like this these days, you know that.
Well, I believe that, too. You got one pass on that.
Tom Costi, resident. I'm curious to know what, it seems as though the approach to these types of projects has changed to where we're separating the design, the concept stage from the construction stage. I worked on an awful lot of projects that were budgeted with boards of directors before they ever even got to the design stage, and it's handled as a complete project. The budget is a moving target, which can change as you go through it, but are we actually going to expect Don Bell to provide design drawings and then have to competitively bid this project again to be the constructor of these signage?
Yes, we are.
And the reason for that?
Well, we're a public unit of government, and it's not a turnkey project. It was never designed as a turnkey project, which is what you're referring to. We have two very distinct phases, and we're going to proceed on that basis.
And I'm curious about the purpose in doing it that way. It seems like a change.
No.
Final design drawings on the clubhouse were not done till well after a contract was placed with a general contractor and an architect. In this case, we're asking for design drawings from somebody who's probably not in the design business. He's in the signage business. But we're asking him to provide design drawings that anybody on the street who approaches the district and qualifies to bid can actually bid that work that he would normally expect to be doing. He's selling his expertise to the board.
Well, Tom, if you were at the last meeting, this was hashed over ad infinitum. Let me finish. Ad infinitum. And if you remember, my comments at that meeting, of which I was outvoted, were along the same lines that you talked about. Mm-hmm. Well, the board voted. This is the procedure. It was always designed that it was going to be in two phases. I won't comment for the record, but you can look at my comments on that.
I guess what brought it up in my mind was John's comments. It appeared from John's previous comments that he expected this to be one capital project, as this resolution was originally. I may have misunderstood, and that was the reason for my comment this morning.
Yeah, it's always been clear that there were two distinct phases, and those two phases were not automatically to be awarded to the same contractor.
I understand. It just seems strange to me. Thank you.
If I may clarify my comment for the record and for Mr. Costi, sir, that was we're deleting as part of a separate capital project. That means Don Bell Signs does not have carte blanche to design every sign project that would ever come up in the future. Let's say we wanted a new sign in front of the clubhouse. No, this doesn't mean that he automatically has that, so that's why we deleted that language.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other public comments? I'll bring it back to the board. Any final thoughts? Okay, Allison?
Supervisor White?
Yes.
Supervisor Hulbert?
Yes.
Supervisor McCullough?
Yes.
Supervisor Halbig?
Yes.
President Miller?
Yes. Okay, we have no add-ons. I believe we have no petitions or communications. We'll now move to staff reports. And first one is Community Service Report.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Tennille Joy Smith, Community Services Director. The first thing I want to address, at the last meeting it was brought up as a concern for Toys Cleaning Services and them not having it wasn't ever bid out. And I wanted to give a little background information so that a decision can be made moving forward on what direction the board would like to go. But originally, when I took over the management of the community center, in March of 2012, the first process for that, the first thing I was asked to do was find a new cleaning company because the one that we had was not working out. So at that time, we had the fire department setting up and helping support on the weekends, and the cleaning company would merely just come in and clean after an event when there was one. And then a couple months after going into it, it was brought to my attention that the cleaning company was supposed to be cleaning the community center, like deep cleaning, because I thought Maria was doing it, but turns out that's not what was going on. So we came to that, we had to start adding them on, and I originally started them every 2 weeks, but then it became apparent that it needed to be a weekly occurrence. In addition to the scrubbing machine for the floors, that also needed to be done on a weekly basis. So they didn't just start out, it didn't start out as a huge expense in the beginning, and then over time it has grown because of the different factors. And then the last thing was when the fire department, when we didn't have the fire department anymore, we needed somebody on the weekends to set up for events. So they're willing to do everything and charge a fee, a reasonable fee, I thought. And I just want to add that I've had very little problems with them. They're very dependable. I also know that they do clean for Sunny Lake Golf Club as well, and they've been very pleased with their work. So I guess, moving forward, I guess it just, do we want to move forward and just let them continue, or?
Well, the issue is not how well they did. That's certainly a major factor. But, John, if we go back to our discussion in the last meeting, the issue was that the contract is over the limit that we can sole source it. And that's a simple legal fact.
Okay.
And I don't see how we can bypass that. Can we, John?
Legally, no.
Oh,
unfortunately, places the district in a bad position, and particularly to Neil, because she has a job to do here, and when we do the low bid thing, we get the problem people that she's talking about, and when we get somebody who really can do the good job.
Yeah, but I asked you at the last meeting.
You did? I'm telling you, I understand that, sir. You did.
We don't have to accept the low bid.
We don't have to accept the low bid. That is correct.
Okay.
And if you bid it out and these people bid the project, they may even be the low bid for all we know.
So if I understand direction, I need to go ahead and bid out the. Okay. I just didn't want the board to think that we intentionally in the beginning started out that way. It just has increased over time.
No problem. It's just the fact that we need to be on sound legal basis.
Of course. So we'll probably bring that. We'll put it out to Ben and bring it at the appropriate time back to the board.
We got your numbers on the memberships.
Yes.
I thank you for that. That was very informative. The growth is impressive, but the one thing that I was curious about, we have all these memberships come with the golf membership.
Yes.
And I wonder if we just could learn what part of those, 700 and some members for the pool is, it's very impressive.
Yes.
But how many of those are golfs, and do we just separate out automatically the 273 or whatever memberships we have from all the other memberships?
That's gonna take a little more digging, but I can try to figure out a way that we can see we may be able to with Encode, so. Separate how many numbers are golf versus...
Yeah, we in effect have two client bases here. We have the automatic memberships that I don't know how much that's used by the golf membership, but and then we have the others that have joined just that particular one.
Right.
So, and that's not an urgent thing. Just when you get a chance, it would be helpful.
Well, and two, just so you're aware of the information involved going into the golf memberships. We don't necessarily... it's automatically offered to them, but they have to sign a waiver, and until we get a waiver, they don't get put into the system. So essentially, everyone who has opted in to using the other services, we don't put them in the system until that happens. they automatically get it, yes, but it's not automatically given to them until they say, yes, I want a golf or a pool membership or a fitness, because some of them don't do all three. A lot of them don't do all three. So the numbers are, I think that the people who are using the other services are probably pretty accurate.
Well, then let's leave it at that then.
Okay.
With that proviso.
Okay.
That's a lot of members for that pool.
Yes.
We're not being overwhelmed by
this summer,
bodies out there.
Well, this summer was the first time that we reached capacity more than one time. So we've been monitoring that very closely. And I think after this summer, we'll have a better understanding, how are we going to approach this for the future? Because we do have to, there are times where we have to turn away people or, say call back in an hour and see if there's room for them to come in.
How about the tennis courts? You getting the waivers? People are signing?
Yes, they've had no issues signing them.
And we still have substantial growth in that area as well, don't we?
Yes, and we'll know more next month because, as you remember, January was our first month of membership last year. So we'll know more next month when people start renewing, if it's affected. We know that they're getting used a lot. So,
do you have point of contacts with these, quote, tennis organization and pickleball organization?
Yes, Jonathan has done an excellent job acquiring a relationship with the leaders of the different and those who are actually scheduling times for groups. In fact, yesterday he met with Judy and Julie Tiger for hosting pickleball clinics. They want to get some new people involved, so we're going to have pickleball clinics for beginners starting in January, and then they'll have a tournament afterwards. So there's definitely organization going on, and I can see for the future, as the courts continue to grow, that there's going to be a lot more opportunities for scheduling and that sort of thing.
I got a question. You mentioned pickleball. Have you had any complaints about noise from the rackets?
We have had 0 complaints.
Okay. I was confused. I was curious because someone mentioned, I forget who it was, mentioned to me that I forget where it was, where they had to change their rackets to a more expensive racket that was soundproof, basically, so that because of the echo of the noise. And I know the one villa, the villas over there are fairly close to it. Mr. Bond lives in those villas, and I didn't know if anybody had ever complained about the noise.
We've had 0 complaints, and I do know that Supervisor White has been talking to some people about, to see if there is some noise-resistant rackets for them to use, and he was going to bring me that information. However, I do also know that the paddles they use a lot of them are very expensive, and they're very particular, just like in golfing, you're particular with the type of club you use. It's the same with pickleball and the type of paddle they use as well. But I'll keep, if we do get some complaints, I'll definitely take that into consideration for going forward with rules and that sort of thing. I do have some pictures from the past month of very busy events. Greg. Of course, we had the Pilgrim Palooza, which I'm sure you all have heard by now was a huge success. We had over 400 people. Despite Mother Nature being a little chilly that night, it didn't affect the event at all, and everyone who was there seemed to have a wonderful time. And we're already starting to plan for the one for next year. And make a few changes. You always, going into a first-time event, and it's that big of a hit the first time, you always look, okay, how can we do this better next year? So the next event we had was the weekend after Thanksgiving, the first week in December. We had a teddy bear breakfast, which, as you remember, last year we had was not that well attended. Well, this year we had close to 150 attend. They had a lot of fun. We had a special Santa, Mike Hurley, and his wife were Santa and Mrs. Claus for me. Just do a great job. And we also participate in the Sebring Christmas Parade the night before, and that was a lot of fun. We had several employees ride the float. We also did something to try a marketing approach. We took a decorated picture frame, and I had a photographer going around taking pictures, and if they got a picture, we handed them a piece of paper saying, go to our Facebook page, and the next week these pictures will be here, and our likes on our Facebook page went up substantially, so it worked. So we'll probably do that again next year. Of course, we had the golf cart parade that same evening. There's a teddy bear breakfast. We're hoping that continues to grow. For the first year, we had 16 carts, so not too bad. But again, we hope it continues to grow. We actually had quite a few spectators on the route, so that was nice to see as well. The upcoming events for the year, as you can see, we don't like to waste any time getting busy. We have the community garage sale Saturday, January 10th. That has been very well received. To date, we have 10 properties signed up, and I anticipate after Christmas and people seeing all the stuff they have accumulated, that we'll probably get a few more applications before the January 2nd deadline. I'm having the annual New Residents Visitors Reception on January 27th at the Island View. We have a pickleball tournament scheduled for February 11th, and that's aside from the clinic tournament, which will be a few days before. But this is along the same lines of the one we had last year. And then we have the Dash and Die scheduled for April 4th.
Mentioned that Manor Hill can use the parking lot here.
Yes, Manor Hill, we're actually going to be setting up spots on the lawn out here in front of the community center. We're going to have spots divided for those who live in the deed-restricted areas that are not able to participate. So everyone can participate if they want to.
Yeah, getting back to the tennis courts, now we only have the one out of commission at present. Is that correct?
We have two. We have two out of commission.
I thought the other one in that pier we were going to put back into operation.
To my knowledge, it was advised against because of the holes that were filled with the material by somebody that was not a Sun and Lake employee, that it wasn't considered a safe.
Okay.
So if the board chooses, if you would like us to put it back in play, we certainly can. I know that we have received complaints that there's not enough courts for them. But the two courts that are being played on are being used quite heavily.
I knew there was no question about the one that's closest to the parking lot, but I thought the companion one on that was we were going to open that again. But Greg, do you feel very strongly that that's a safety issue on the other one?
If it were my neck, I wouldn't open it. I'd leave it to the board's direction. Choose, I choose. I wouldn't want to make that decision.
Board have any comment on that?
Leave it closed.
Yeah, I'd leave it closed, but one suggestion on your golf cart parade, I would suggest you do it an hour earlier.
Okay.
Because a lot of the people along the parade route that were watching, it was so dark you really couldn't see a lot of the decorations on the cart, and if you did it maybe at 5:30 instead of 6:30, it'd be more.
Okay.
Just as a suggestion.
I have a question too on the pickleball outside people that you have memberships for. That'll come due in January. How does the gate automatically stop working, or how does that roll over to check the new membership?
Well, their card, just like at the pool or the gym, has a expiration date set in the system, and it will not.
So the gate will not open for them?
It won't.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean, and this has been, I don't want to say it's an issue now, but it was, where someone would leave the gate open or just let them in. But we'll have security. A lot of the memberships, I would say probably 75% of them will come due between January and February. So.
Okay. Dick, talking about that, the other paddles, I believe it was John Otto that told me that wherever his club is up north, they had a ruling on it, and apparently there's some designs of paddles that are somewhat quieter. I don't know how much, I printed a thing off the internet, and I've got to get it to Neil, and maybe they can check some of the paddles and see if there's a big difference in noise or what there is. I don't have a clue what there is.
Well, probably the bottom line is whether or not we're getting complaints on that.
Yes.
And to date, we've had none. Is that correct?
We've had no complaints whatsoever. I even asked Mike.
We should leave sleeping dogs alive.
That's a good idea.
That new resident thing, how do you find out who are new residents?
Whoever signed up mostly for water. We go through the water.
Okay.
And a lot of people last year responded via the newsletter.
Who from the district attends that?
Who?
I mean, does the general manager attend? Do you attend? Megan attend? Who goes to this?
The golf gets involved. Last year, I believe Dave Ford was the one there. I'm there. Jonathan's there. It's mostly to talk about all that we have to offer at Sun and Lake that they may not be aware. And actually, the way that it's worked the last 2 years, instead of giving a presentation, each of us talks about something different. We go around to every table so that people feel more comfortable asking questions, and it's actually worked out pretty well. I also had Ned and Judy Duran, who have been ambassadors in the past, come and talk about their experiences as well and all that they do with Sun and Lake.
So does somebody from security go?
I have not had someone from security in the past, but I'm sure if I asked Mike, he would be.
Well, we brag about our watch orders and what we do to have a safe community. I think that would be important. I would think it'd be important the general manager be there.
Well, we do mention it in our, like when I go around and talk about something aside from recreation or golf, I do mention security and all they do. But like I said, I'm sure Mike would be happy to.
Which Mike?
Oh, Mike Hurley.
We've talked about every group attending except one.
The board.
The Board of Supervisors. And if I remember correctly, last year we weren't invited to come. And not this year either, so.
Okay.
Take it for what it's worth.
Okay. I will, certainly.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Neil.
you.
That's an impressive list of activities, so
Thank you.
compliment you on that. Security report. I don't know if we need a presentation, but do we have any comments on that? Okay. Code enforcement. I do have one comment on security. What is the situation with these estate sales that are blossoming again, I guess? And we have a situation, what is it, on Pebble Beach? Some problems?
Well, we've had a few situations. Sherry started back. She did one a couple of weeks ago. We had about at least a dozen calls on that. One of the neighbors called and said that she was bringing stuff in off a trailer. We actually went over there. We taped off a big area so the people would stay off the grass. I also suggested to her to get somebody to do the parking for her for the next 2 days. She did that. It was quite a mess for the neighbors because of the area it was in. It was right on a corner. There was construction going on one of the houses next door, so that made it worse. We did have a problem there. Pebble Beach, we do have a person that sold the house, bought a house further down the street, and we have just cited him twice. He'll actually start paying a fine today if he doesn't move his trailer out of the area. He did move it yesterday.
Well, we've had quite a bit of pushback on Sherry's activities, and she had indicated she was done. I believe that was a few months ago.
I mean, in her defense, I think it was an old customer. The one thing I will say about Sherry is, at least when you go talk to her, she tries to fix it. It's not that she does fix it every time, but she does try. She promised me that this was probably the last one. I was called on Friday, it was called on Saturday, at home from the neighbors, personal phone calls. So that's why I went over there but she did try to fix it. It was a mess for the neighbors, and, we apologize for that. There was nothing that we could do about it. She had the right permits, and everything was legal, so, we couldn't shut it down.
No, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, well, I did threaten to tell her if she didn't get somebody that, to come and park the cars, it's not fair for the neighbors that, that I would call the sheriff's department and close it down. And so she called somebody and did parking. But there were a few neighbors who were very, very upset with it.
Okay, there'll be a period here at the end of the meeting for public comment, and we would welcome any comments you have. John, I hate to throw that to you, but where do we stand on that from a legal standpoint? I know you're shaking your head.
Well, I'm just saying. First of all, I wasn't aware that we'd had a new issue, and nobody's asked me to review that at this point. I'm kind of cold on that. If you'd like me to review that with Mr. Hurley and go over all that and give you a report by email, I'm happy to do that. I'm not prepared at this point to say.
No, I know, but I, for one, would like to know, does the board have any comment or feelings on this? I know it was not a positive thing when we discussed it prior to that. John, why don't you go ahead and take some time. David, you have a comment?
I don't know how the board could control any of it if there is no homeowners association. I mean, and she's got all the permits that are required. I don't see how you can do it. I don't like the idea of having them, but here we are. We're doing a community-wide sale, so it's hard to. I don't like it any more than anybody else does, and I know it's really a problem for the but they need to do something about getting their homeowners association put back together.
To me,
or join another one or something, and maybe some of that will stop. I don't know.
Fair enough. Okay, thanks, Mike.
Mike, stay up there.
Oh.
Stay there. I'm waiting for the next subject here.
Okay. Next subject, code enforcement.
All righty, the question I got for you on violations. Looks like parking violations are 50% of all of our problems.
Parking on the grass, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So this notice of violation that we start out with, is that given to the homeowner, or is it given to the person owning the car?
The person, it's given to the person that is living at the address.
So renters get the notice, not the homeowner.
Right, exactly.
So why don't we give it? Why don't we give it to the homeowner?
Well,
it's a violation of the property.
We have started to do that over the last few months. We're doing both. If it's a repeater, now what we'll do, we'll send it to the person that rents, and we'll also send it to the homeowner. Now the homeowners have been very good. Getting back to us, and they always tell us they'll talk to they'll talk to the renter, and I mean that has worked. I mean 100% no, but it's starting to work better than in the past.
Because I look at these addresses and they're the same every month, same guys, and they're probably renters.
Well, what I see the biggest problem is prepared surfaces. Anyone that prepares a surface can park on the grass, which is absolutely ridiculous, because they can go to Home Depot and buy mulch for $2, buy 10 bags, spread it on, kind of make an area, and legally they can park there.
Well, maybe we need to redefine prepared surface.
Right, right.
It's It's in our ordinance. There's a very specific description of what a proper prepared surface is, and perhaps we're not addressing that.
Well, see, here's the problem. Once they prepare it, okay, they put the boards around it, they put the mulch down, they put the stone down, and that's it. Everything grows up, and so it's prepared, but it's not taken care of. Let's put it that way.
Well, then we need to maintain it or something.
I think we really have to look at the rules that we have here and probably make some changes. And John and I can probably sit down and talk about that after, like you said, about parking and code.
There's also a limitation on prepared surface, as I recall, to a certain percentage of the yard area.
Okay.
And so, whether or not that's been evaluated is another issue, too.
So maybe you can bring something to the next meeting so we can discuss this.
Okay.
Maybe find a fix here.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it seems it's always the same people over and over, and it's more renters than anybody, I think.
Well,
is there any way we can put some more weight behind these violation notices? John?
Sir, we have been round and round with this code enforcement issue.
Okay.
We went through that whole prepared service when we amended the code enforcement. And I think the issue is that very, very few people that are attempting to have this extra parking follow the rules on that. I think that would be easy to check. I know there's several people in my street, for example, that don't follow exactly what they're supposed to be doing. A couple do, but most don't. We can certainly begin to cite them for that. I mean, we can at least make them adhere.
Well,
if the surface, if properly prepared according to our ordinance, is fairly substantial. So not in terms of area, but in terms
we do have a new
of
form that actually we started December 1st. That's right in the security, and anything that they find, they mark it, they put the date and the time. The next shift will do the same thing. So after 2 days, then we can start citing them. So I'm working with Bob on that to get a lot stricter. And you're right, we have been, it's hard. Here's the problem, is a lot of these homes were built for 2 cars. How many people have 2 cars today? If they have a family, there's 3 and 4 cars. We have a sheriff's car that parks on the grass all the time.
I was going to ask you about that. Right there in Matanzas.
Right.
It's bare dirt.
Right.
So have you ever cited him?
It was prepared originally, see, and that's the problem. So.
Well, cite him again. As long as it's you doing it.
Well, it's kind of tough to cite them when they work with us very well.
I understand.
Well, that particular group of housing, right, where that car he's talking about is,
I know.
notorious.
Well, a matter of fact, I just had a resident come up to me in a clubhouse, and I went and talked to the owner of the house next door, which was a past employee from here, and told him, you're hitting this guy's, sprinklers. Oh, no, I'm not. Well, I took him out and showed him, and sure enough, it was broken, and, you could see it. So, but he had a prepared surface, and they drive out, on the guy's grass. So, we did cite him, so we'll see if they fix it or not. I don't know. But I'll work with John and Greg and Mike, and maybe we come up with the prepared surface, a little better than we have. I think that's a big problem. Prepared surface.
The only thing is, I will study our ordinance carefully, because I'm not a big fan of making it much tighter than it is, because we're going to have to go back to the county for that. And if the language is sufficient to allow us to enforce what is a prepared surface, then I think we can internally do that without getting a modification to our charter.
We had. I remember that because I was closely involved with those discussions and the language and so forth. We have a very adequate description of what's required for those type of surfaces. Our problem is, and the same with the cars. And I know the cars is just a incredible headache, but we either enforce this stuff or it becomes a joke. And maybe we have to be more aggressive.
Right. Okay.
Maybe we should be more aggressive, I should say.
Okay.
Well, I have a warrior over here that's correcting my maybes, so.
I agree with a lot with, I mean, Kurt and I went to the code enforcement downtown, and, you know, some things we can fix and some things, you know, we can't, but.
Well, I know how that goes. I've taken several rides with you before myself, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. John, you're up, General Counsel.
First thing I would say is thank you for the contract renewal. I appreciate that. Enjoy representing the district. The second thing I would say is the Sun and Lake float is not a legal issue, but that was a great float. My wife loved it, and one of the better floats in the parade. So the district was well represented there. The third thing is the Don Bell signs contract issue. I just want to make sure that you know that I've advised you of this. We did have some potential bid protest issue. One of the things that surfaced was we don't really have any formal bid protest procedure here in the district, and we do not fall under the state bid protest procedures. My response has always been we attempt to follow the state procedures whenever possible, but we do not have our procedures in place. There are such procedures available. Lewis, Longman, and Walker, the Association of Special Districts, has drafted several of these for other districts. Very comprehensive, very good. So if you want to consider adopting that, we can work that up, but you need to let me know. The other thing I would point out is that pursuant to the state procedure, it states that in the event of a bid protest, we grind to a halt until the protest is resolved. Okay, so I don't know what we have right now. Mr. Lim has stated that, well, how do I protest this? My response to him through the district general manager was that the bid protest procedure is you got to bring an action in the circuit court as opposed to going to Department of Administrative Hearings, which is the state procedure. Mr. Lim said, well, he really didn't want to go do something like that. So I'm not sure where this potential bid protest issue stands. And if he makes a protest, I'm presuming that we would have to have that resolved before we went any further with Don Bell signs. There are certain time limitations, of course. By giving the go-ahead to Don Bell, we are proceeding as expeditiously as possible to meet the district's needs for the wayfaring signs. We can't just sit back indefinitely and have this threat of a bid protest floating around when nothing's ever been filed.
Well, you've answered that.
Did.
You've taken action on that. What
did
more
respond
do we
to
need
that.
to do?
There was a response back subsequent to that he still wished to have some sort of protest involved. My response to that is then go to circuit court and file the case. We're done. There's been no case filed. I'm just simply telling you, if a case is filed, we may have to revisit the issue. That's all.
That in itself, to me, is a procedure.
It is a procedure.
I don't think we need
I agree.
to pile on regarding that.
But we don't.
That's the only time. Have we ever had another one before? You've been around.
We've had threats, but nobody's ever carried forward through with one. So.
Well, you said, if I remember correctly, you said in your letter to him was that you felt very strongly that procedures had been followed and the deliberations were correct and objective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what else can we say?
When you said, I don't believe my letter actually said procedures have been followed.
Well, whatever, you know what I'm saying.
I did clearly state to him that I felt there had been no violation that would warrant a bid protest, and that I gave him some case law citations, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, when that meeting was going on, I think I asked twice, and Supervisor McCullough asked once if we're on legal solid ground as far as awarding that to Don Bell versus this Tagram or whatever his name is, and I think you.
When you say legal solid ground, the issue there is their bid submission in compliance with our RFP requirements. That was the nature of that. What I'm telling you is different. What I'm telling you now is, having made that award, to have a disgruntled competitive bid now threaten a bid protest. Different rules come into place, okay? And all I'm saying that if you read the statute says that in the event of a bid protest, the protest must be resolved before you proceed further. That's all. The district is not bound by that statute. We're not governed by the statute. We're not a state agency. That's why we're not governed by DOA rules and other things, DOA being the Department of Administrative Hearings. I just want to give you this advice now, that if there is a bid protest, we'll have to deal with where we go to resolve that as relates to the Don Bell signed contract award.
Well,
I thought we put a deadline date on
We
there.
did.
And so if he hasn't responded before, then...
That would be a defense we would raise. I agree.
Okay.
That actually, this meeting, didn't it? This meeting, I believe
it
was
is.
the deadline, so.
I do not anticipate such a protest. At the same time, if I didn't give you this advice and we get a protest, then you'll say, why didn't you tell us about this? So I'm just trying to give you the heads up, okay? That's all.
Well, we like to do that, John.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, do you have anything else?
Yes, I do. I would also indicate that the board policies that we've been directed to address, we felt best addressed when we had a full staff here and everything. We intend to bring that up, I believe, at the first meeting in January. So that is being prepared and will be presented to you for your consideration. The last thing I'll bring up is we did receive a response.
John, what were you talking about?
The board policy changes. By that, I'm referring to, we had several. One was that on the sewer issue, that if you already have a tap, you have to tap any subsequent taps you desire into your existing line and not into the main line, one per residence. There was the issue of the assessments, the effect of a unity of title agreement, and an appeal procedure that the board has yet to adopt.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have a lot to say about that one, but I'll just wait until that time.
Okay. The last item is with respect to the Attorney General's response. We did receive a response letter yesterday. Came into my email at 4:20. I think you have it before you. I'll send it to each of you. Essentially, the Attorney General reviewed our request on the Tanglewood issue as to what governs the district agreement or the subsequently enacted statute stating that mobile homes will be assessed in the same manner as a hotel, motel, or other similar facility. The Attorney General opined that the statute had no language regarding retroactive application, and therefore the statute did not change the contract the district had with Tanglewood, but any future amendments to the assessments in the contract would have to comply with that section. So we requested the response and received it.
Yeah, I'm curious, John. It's addressed to me, and I seem to have gotten that third hand. Who got this first?
I can't answer that. I can tell you I received that by email from the Attorney General, perhaps because I'm counsel of the district and they gave me a courtesy copy.
They faxed to the district to your attention, Mr. Miller, and that came in after we left the office yesterday. It was waiting for me this morning.
Okay, well, I think I got this on my computer this morning. I guess the same time all the board members got it. So it's a matter of curiosity. Okay, John, anything else?
That's all I have, sir.
Okay, we have nothing from Public Works. Tanya, anything from General Manager?
Mr. Wright sent you the general manager's report by email. Do y'all have any questions regarding that report?
Status report?
Yes, sir.
I have none. I guess not.
Okay.
No unfinished business. Go ahead.
I do want to say that the new playground out there looks very nice.
Good.
The pictures we got on the email, don't you think?
Yeah, I was curious. What is the flooring? I haven't been out there to see it, but
Rubber.
Is that a rubber?
Yeah.
We haven't had a real test yet, rain-wise yet, have we?
Actually, we have. We can hear the water flowing quite well.
Oh, that's good. We certainly had enough problems before, but I hope that last project, that's a good point, Rick. It does look very nice, very attractive. Okay. New business? None?
Yeah, I was going to bring up one thing.
Okay. Do you want to save that for the discussion? You want to do it now? Either way.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. No committee reports. Public comments. Yes. No problem. No problem. You wouldn't be the first, and you won't be the last.
Wait a minute. I interviewed all of the, well, not all of them, but many of my name. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. My name is Patricia Schneider. I live on Tangiers Street. And it was a horrendous event. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. It was a horrendous event, but that's not really my concern. It's the safety of the people and the traffic that was there. And I don't know that there wouldn't be a liability for the amount of people that were there, the kids, the older people with their walkers. They were walking up the street. There was no, there was no coordination. We did have the roofing truck. People were trying to squeeze through it. We had the garbage truck that couldn't get through, couldn't make a turn. And my husband said, what about an ambulance? What about the fire? No, they couldn't get through without really blowing the horn and getting through. So that was the situation. I was concerned about the children and the older people. What can we do about it? Now, there's something else. The downtown says that it's only 3 days. She had a 4-day event. So please make note of that. Look it up online, please. They only have 3 days for a garage sale. And I just like to know what we could do as a community so that we wouldn't have that. That was awful. My husband almost had a heart attack over it, I'll tell you. That's how bad it was. We did have some help. I can't say that they didn't help us. They came out and put some lines up. And then my husband put a sign up, no parking this side. And that seemed to help to get the traffic through. Excuse me. When I think back on, and I've never had in a situation like this. And I've been in homeowners associations and other too. So excuse me for not being very nice. It just was very upsetting to us.
No, I think as you can tell from our earlier comments and conversations, this is a troubling issue for us as well, and we're kind of struggling how we're going to deal with it. I'm sorry that our security chief left, but this really falls in his purview to perhaps introduce stricter measures regarding this. And of course, we always have the legal aspect that we have to address. So,
I was really concerned. You had little kids out there running around. You had people stopping in the middle of the street. It was a mess. One day we said, we can't take it. We left. We went to Sarasota.
Well, the point is you shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And
well, thank you for being so kind. I really appreciate it. Here I am all upset, and I didn't want to get upset. I wanted to keep it very, undertoned, but thank you. I really appreciate it.
We've talked to our legal counsel. He's going to look into it, our security, and we'll try to come up with a better scenario the next time. So.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying. I don't want any other person to go through that. And I'll tell you, though, there's some good came out of it. I met the best neighbors that way.
Well, there you go.
Did. We have a great community. I really love it. Well, don't misunderstand.
Anyway, we appreciate your comments, and please don't be reluctant that when you have an issue
Thank you.
to come up and talk to us.
I really appreciate it. I feel a lot better. I don't know why that just brought that back, and here I couldn't talk for it. And I really appreciate everybody listening to me. I've had other things. We've moved about 18 times in our life, my husband and I, and we love it here. It's quiet. That's what we love.
We'll see if we can't do better.
Yeah,
thank you.
Come back to our meetings more often.
That's my fault. I will.
come back more often.
Tom Costi, resident. With regard to the estate sales, and Sherry in particular, you might recall that probably 6 months to a year ago, we had this discussion at the board level, and it was stated by the attorney at that time, who's now going to look into it again, that this is designated by the county as residential area, and no businesses are allowed to be operated on residential properties within the district. So there is my understanding from what was said at that meeting, that that is already on the books with the county, and that can be enforced. The reason that we didn't take it all the way through to conclusion at that particular meeting with any specific board action was that it was reported that that was Sherry's last event, and she would no longer be doing it. So we didn't go any further with any formal documentation within the district, is the way I recall it. So now evidently Sherry's changed her mind. As a matter of fact, 2 or 3 times since then, right within 2 doors of my house in Manor Hill, she had a sale for. Sherry lives here, and she's got a lot of friends, and there are a lot of people that impose upon her to help them get rid of their stuff, and she's willing to come and operate a sale on their property, and she does it for a fee. So she's operating a business. That's one comment that I'd like to make. The other is with regard to the fact that we have a landowner meeting coming up in January, and we don't have an election this year. However, we will have one a year from this January, and that means that there's a potential for people to be out campaigning sometime during the year. And because of what occurred at the last board meeting with regard to assessments on a particular lot, I think we might have some muddy water that we really need to address, and I would like to make a few comments. I realize it was said that we're going to be talking about that at the next...
Tom, I just wonder if it would have more effect if you did it, in fact, wait until the January meeting and get it all out on the table.
Well, we might... I want to make certain that everybody realizes, Dick, and can I, if I could, have another minute or so to just solidify, remind people that our assessment system is now also our voting system. We changed, and it was stated at the last meeting that we did a precedent-setting action at the last meeting by forgiving assessments on a lot that's defined within the district. May I finish, please? And we did so. And that particular piece of property that we forgave taxes on is larger than over 2,000 lots that are being assessed fully within this district right now. I think that there might be a can of worms there that it could be protested that those 2,000 lots perhaps should not be getting assessed any more than the one that got forgiven.
But these are arguments that I've asked you to bring up in the January meeting. Tom, you're making an argument.
Are you asking that I sit down and not talk about it any further?
I'm asking you politely if you'll defer those comments to the January meeting.
Well, I might not be able to make it, Dick. I've been quite sick off and on lately, and we do have a landowner meeting that this will likely be a point of discussion at this upcoming landowner meeting in January, which is the meeting after next.
January. That's the end of January. The landowner meeting.
And keep in mind, every assessment rate within this district is based on an equivalent residential unit. It's all based on the residential assessment rate. All of these lots over here from Bortego to Tanglewood are smaller than the piece of property that we forgave that you folks forgave taxes on Angelo Circle. There are lots all up and down Matanzas. There's lots all up and down Calatrava that are smaller than this piece of property that taxes were forgiven upon. I just make that comment. And that is voting power. Our assessments are votes within the district now. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, thank you. Have any other public comment? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for any final comments by the board.
When is the landowners
27th of January. Oh, by the way, along those lines, I did see the notation for that in the newsletter. We need to reinforce that, particularly in the 2 weeks before we have it, including, I think, posting it in our public places, so we make sure. Last year was an absolute disaster. I think we had 4 people. So, and that's an important part, or it has been traditionally an important part of our process here in Sun and Lake. So, if we could do that, please.
I've also got some brief comments about this assessment discussion we had at the last meeting. And I hate to say it, but I believe that the vote was more political and not in the best interest of the district. That being the case, the more I thought about that after the meeting, I contacted John McClure about some questions I had, and I think if some of this would have been brought out at the meeting, the outcome may have been different. And John, if I can I read a couple of these things that it's a matter of public comment. One of the questions I had about the member of the staff lowering or forgiving assessments, and I asked John if that can happen. And he said, first, as to whether a staff member can take an action to unilaterally lower an assessment without board action, my answer is that of anybody else is clearly no. So a member of the board, including Michael Wright, cannot forgive or lower assessments. And then he went on to say that our response has always been that no assessment, once levied, can be forgiven or reduced. And that's the clear position of the General Counsel for the Association of Special Districts. There's a body of law that holds that taxes, once the tax roll is certified, cannot be forgiven or reduced except by court order, which requires that a lawsuit be filed and determined. Now, we're getting ready to put together a procedure by which the district is going to be the arbitrator for anybody that wants to come in here and whines about their assessments. And we've already got procedures in place. One is what John just mentioned in this email, and the other is when we go through the budget process. And I think it was a big mistake. We give this gentleman a 30% reduction on his assessments. And what if Tom Cotsey or Rex Bond or Mr. Stange wants a 30% reduction on their assessments? We set a precedent there. I think we made a mistake. I think we need to really have a real hard discussion about this when we start talking about this procedure that makes the district board of supervisors an arbitrator on this situation. I'm going to resist that, and I think it ought to come back probably as a discussion rather than John putting together a whole lot of words that we're 40 years into this thing. I don't think that's necessary. I think this was just a help your buddy situation more than it was done in the best interest of the district.
John, I think you pointed out that we were deficient in that area. Is that correct, policy-wise?
Very deficient, in my opinion. I think what we need is just to comply with due process, some procedure by which all property owners are notified of their proposed assessment and an opportunity to challenge that if so desired.
Don't we advertise that every year in the newspaper, John? Don't we have public hearings on that? We're going through the budget process. Hell, Dick just talked about piling on. That's piling on again. If you put together another procedure, a separate mailing, and so on and so forth, maybe we ought to give this thing back to the county. Let them do the taxes. Then we're not going to have any problem. Okay?
That's a political decision, sir, by the board to make. But my point simply is this, that with respect to every property in the county, they receive a trim notice. They also have county hearings, same county advertisements. The point is, for due process, somebody who lives in Ohio and owns property down here doesn't read our newspaper, and that's the only notice we give, basically. So if the board elects not to do it, that's your choice. My recommendation is to do it.
Well, I still look forward to your presenting that first meeting in January.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Kurt, you had...
My question is, and I was going to ask it anyway, even though Mr. Wright's not here, but I know his contract's coming up next year, and my question is, what would be the proper time to start the procedure to look for?
I plan to introduce that in the January meeting.
Okay, thanks.
We'll decide on how we want to proceed. Anybody else? Okay. Hope everybody has a very happy holiday season, even wearing the wrong jacket.
And Merry Christmas to the board.
Thank you.
I'm surprised I was able to see it.
It worked well, really.